Assessing English language learners delves into looking at gathering information on English language learners, not only in terms of their language proficiency, but also looking at the relationship of language proficiency to their academic achievement. It's a very complex undertaking, and so I try to be very deliberate in a step-by-step process in helping teachers and administrators address some of the principles behind assessment of English language learners, how English language learners come to school with potentially more than one language that needs to be assessed in order to get a comprehensive profile of who these students are in order to differentiate instruction. And differentiation in instruction can imply use of the native language as well as English, and also it means that assessment must follow suit if in fact assessment is to be embedded in instruction. Within the book we also discuss not only the use of formative assessment data and how that helps inform classroom instruction, but how formative information needs to complement that of large-scale state assessments, which are used for accountability purposes. So all in all, the book tries to capture the compendium of assessment practices for any teacher or administrator who is working with English language learners that moves into this new generation of English language proficiency assessment that really tries to hone in on academic language proficiency and how that is coupled with academic achievement. I think one of the most important principles is one of the field of measurement that sometimes it's not applied to any student. That is, in order to make a sound instructional or educational decision, you need to base it on a collection of evidence. And that this collection or data gathering must represent multiple perspectives and multiple measures. Oftentimes in haste or in terms of expediency, teachers are told to make judgments on students, on classrooms, on schools with very limited data sources. So I think that's the number one principle. And for English language learners to realize that you always have to contextualize the data, because English language learners are in fact a very heterogeneous mix of students. You may have students that in fact are fully proficient and literate in their first language, and so their pace of acquiring English will be quite rapid. You will also have children that will be coming with refugee status, with limited opportunities for schooling, and don't have a firm foundation in that native language. And so the instructional methodologies used with those students need to be different. So always look at the historical, demographic, and experiential background of the students. I would say that would be a second principle. And then always couch results of assessment within those characteristics. I think oftentimes schools and districts just look at numbers and don't understand that these numbers represent people. I think teachers need to counteract the emphasis or the weighting of large-scale assessment with very sound formative assessments. Assessments that can be standard, that is common across classrooms, and the only way to reach this common ground is through consensus. And I think that was an important emphasis, that teachers are moving towards joint or mutual goals for English language learners, and through working together they come to some kind of agreement as to how to use rubrics, how to interpret student work using the same criteria, and how these criteria are just as important for making daily instructional decisions as that is a one-time annual test. Teachers need to understand that differentiation applies to both language proficiency and achievement. And much of the literature addresses how to differentiate instruction for content. When you think about English language learners, they are scattered across a second language acquisition continuum. And that's arbitrarily divided into levels. Every state has an English language proficiency test that provides information on composite scores and on the individual language domains. Most states use a 5-level system, 1 being at the starting or entering point, and 5 being that the students are bridging over to academic parity. And so for teachers of English language learners, it's important to take that construct of differentiation and apply it also to language proficiency. So it's double differentiation. On top of it, I think teachers struggle with the notion that in classroom assessment, you're embedding differentiation and extending it into assessment. So for English language learners, for example, the use of manipulatives and other kinds of supports, being able to have access to manipulatives and having the ability to form cooperative groups, or for students to talk to each other or use technology as a means of accessing content is critical for instruction. But when it comes time to assess these children, oftentimes those supports disappear. And what I try to do in the book is to exemplify how these supports can be carried into assessment to really show what the students know and are able to do.